It is not often I get to record in person. We are down the street from my house, which is where I'm recording all the time. And it's not often that I'm recording with somebody who I have been smoking joints with for a very, very, very long time.
Not
So,
true, mom.
not true, mom. It's
Just
true, my
joking.
mom.
And my mom knows too.
So if you live under a rock in Canada, you may not know the name Alison Gordon, but Alison is, when they refer to the OGs, Alison is. And in Canada, and certainly really, and what I've come to learn, when you're in Canada and you've done something in Canada and you're one of the first people to do it in Canada, you by virtue of that become this global thought leader. And so Alison is very much at the top of her game. You know,
Oh,
originally at Rethink Breast Cancer, which I certainly I want to understand, Rethink and how you
yeah.
got into cannabis, and then I'm going to reveal something to you that I've never said to you, and I wanted to save it for something like this, which is, just how much you really paved the way
Oh,
for me and with my children specifically in talking about
right.
cannabis. So it's really cool. So Al
Thanks, George.
was, see, I wrote all this down just in case. So founding member of Weed MD, which is funny because like these are the things that I, for whatever reason, block out of my memory
Yeah,
that I
me
had
too.
no
Just joking. I love that. No,
I had no
that's
recollection
everything.
of
That
that.
was everything for me.
Was it? That was the
Well, that
stepping
was
stone to
the
48
stepping
North.
stone. Yeah.
Right. So, and then you went to found and become the CEO of 48
Yes.
North, and now one of the greatest names in all of cannabis, OPP, Other People's Pot, which is
Yes.
this boutique sales agency here in Canada. So, In the Weeds is very humbled to have the
Oh,
one and the only Alison Gordon. Welcome,
thanks,
Al.
George. I feel the same and I love you.
Okay, so let's talk about Rethink Breast
Yes.
Cancer. So did you, and it's MJ, right?
Yes, MJ and I co-founded Rethink Breast Cancer in 2001. So really MJ is the brainchild. She just brought me along for the ride, but we had met doing a breast cancer campaign for another organization she was with. We were gearing it towards young people, which back in 2001, everything, cancer related would be like 1 in 9 women will die of breast cancer, and B, geared to women in their over 60, because that is the largest percentage of people who get breast cancer. But MJ, had this spot time donated to her on Much Music, which is like the Canadian MTV.
Right.
And we created this campaign with a young guy saying, do you find you don't have time to do your breast self exam? Well, I'm here to do it for you, absolutely free. Anyone listening now that's young is like, whatevs to that. But back then, this was like major. It was the cover of the newspapers. We had 7 news stations. Like using humor to talk about breast cancer just wasn't a thing.
Right.
And after that explosion, MJ called and said, I want to start an organization geared towards young women with breast cancer, or really to educate young people. And ultimately, young women came out of the woodwork and said, hey, wait, we love what you're doing. And there's nothing for us out here. We're in support groups with women in their 60s. I'm 27. I've been seeing my boyfriend for 6 months. How do I talk about a double mastectomy? And we just realized that there was need for support and advocacy for young women. And so we built that to be a national organization across Canada. It still is an amazing organization that MJ is running. But during this time, as you said, I've been a long time cannabis user, very long, since I was 14. And I don't know. I just what actually happened was a family member was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. She was in her 70s, never tried cannabis before. And I said, listen, like, why don't you talk to your doctor about using cannabis? Not even really realizing Canada had a medical program. This is back in 2008. And she spoke to her doctor, and he was like, great, we'll get you a license. And I was like, whoa, what are you talking about? Like, there's a medical program in Canada. And again, this is really just my own privilege as to, like as a white woman, that I just was able to get my cannabis without the risks that others that aren't me would have had, and therefore, knew of the medical program. So once I learned this existed, I naively was like, oh my God, I'm going to brand it. I'm going to open stores like David's Tea. This is back in 2008. So naive. But I started looking at the industry then, and looking at the US and going, this is going to turn. This is going to turn. And it took me a long time because I loved the work we were doing at Rethink. But in 2013, I was like, you know what? Like, you're going to kill yourself if you don't make a move towards whatever is happening. And for those of you that are Canadian, you'll remember that the government of Canada in, I think, 2012 or 11 had announced that they were going to change the medical program. They were going to start giving out more licenses than the one company that was licensed at the time. And so I jumped in, and as you said, was part of WeedMD at the very beginning, as they were applying for licensing, and we were going to hit the ground running. And then come early 2014, the government, stops licenses. And we all know we call it, the winning 8 or the lotteried 8 that got that.
Right.
And that became Canopy, Aurora, like actually not Aurora, but Afria, those that were early,
right.
Obviously, were able to raise money and do all that they did. WeedMD was delayed in licensing, and we decided to go raise more money and start acquiring assets in the US. And this is really what I think, wasn't great for WeedMD not to get licensed, but my own personal journey, being able to travel around Canada and the US and build my network and really learn the intricacies of what's going on, because cannabis is extremely complicated on the regulatory side, obviously, but also, figuring out who's who in any zoo takes some time. So that really, we
Who's who in any zoo.
Yeah. So that was, that started the journey, and we wound up acquiring one of 4 legally permitted dispensaries in California back in 2014. And that back then, California wasn't just not legal. You had to be a not-for-profit. It was
Right.
like a crazy place to be, but I learned so much there and just saw so much opportunity in the US, and I still do. And ultimately, I came back to Canada. I was asked to help out with a company that was going bankrupt, had no licenses, and I wound up taking over that company, rebranding it 48 North, getting all the licenses, taking the company public, and doing all that jazz. So that's the journey, George.
So it's funny because I didn't even realize that, and now it all makes sense, that
Right.
you are very much a creative. And so when
Right.
I looked at your LinkedIn this morning, it's
Yeah.
amazing what you learn on LinkedIn, because Ryan, my brother, was at Taxi.
Yes.
Ryan was also at, was it Ogilvy that you were at?
No, it was a company called Zig that got bought ultimately by Crispin Porter Bogowski,
Crispin,
and
right.
then I don't even know.
Yeah, I saw Crispin. So you were in advertising
was.
before you even
Yes.
got into Rethink.
Yes, but I was very young. Like, I actually was doing a PhD. I was on a path to be a professor. And then one summer I thought, you know what, I should probably get a job somewhere other than the university, because, I taught courses and stuff. So I wound up reaching out to friends that worked in advertising. I was like, is this? They were like, yeah, you know what? What I was doing in academia was called cultural studies, which is
Right.
part of sociology, where you're sort of, going deep into thinking about, why does bottled water have pictures of mountains? Why do we associate mountains with purity and not
Right.
streams? And
Right.
these are all social constructs. So that's advertising. You're just using that same think process towards selling, and I just loved it, and I never went back for my PhD.
And do you employ all of those approaches today? I mean, you own you're a co-founder of OPP.
Yes, with Amy Weinstein, the greatest there ever was.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
She is amazing.
Yeah.
And so you're obviously employing a lot of your creativity. Before we even came on, and whether that was, the most recent post that I was referencing on social media, or was it other people's parents?
Other people's parents.
So whether that was your brainchild or not, I mean, obviously, but that creativity that's coming into play is obviously a huge part of your game still.
Yeah.
Was using humor to talk about breast cancer awareness. Oops. And continues to, as you're selling amazing brands on the Canadian market and creating that content like other people's parents.
Yeah. So, I mean, taking a step back, when we started OPP, Other People's Pot, Amy and I, in just early 2021, the thinking really, first of all, we had worked on the other side, as I said. So I had run an LP, we had an indoor grow, we had an outdoor grow, we had post-harvest manufacturing. So I had done everything on that side of the business, really. I also was lucky enough to sit on the Industry Association board for many years. So I had been meeting with Health Canada 4 times a year. And I really, understand that all that goes into the regulatory, both at the provincial and federal level. And what we were noticing is that these sales agencies were popping up in Canada, coming from alcohol and tobacco. And Amy and I just fundamentally felt and feel that selling weed is just different. We believe that cannabis is medicine, even when it's recreational. And that's not what I think about alcohol or tobacco. I think, I've said many times, the unique thing about selling cannabis is the bud tenders. Like if you walked into an alcohol store and someone was as passionate about alcohol as these bud tenders are about cannabis, you'd be worried about them, right? It's just because it's a different product. And the fact is, the bud tenders are being bombarded with everybody who wants them to try and promote their cannabis. And we just felt that it was for us to do that we're weed people. And if we could get creative and do that, they would respect and enjoy what we're offering.
Someone said recently, maybe it even wasn't so recently, but maybe it was quick chance. Somebody mentioned that when you talk about alcohol versus cannabis,
yes,
there are only so many ways to consume alcohol,
yes,
right? But with cannabis, we have so many different layers.
Yeah.
Like there's so many different products
Yeah.
that you can buy, and there's so much education that comes into it. So where do bud tenders come into play with OPP? How important are they?
Yeah, they're the most important. I mean, we don't have any exact stats, but I would put money that they influence at least 80% of the sales. Like, I don't believe that anybody walks in a store, a dispensary, asks for something, they don't have it, and those people leave. The bud tenders will say, well, this is also really good, or this is similar to that. A lot of people walk in, what's new, what's good. So the bud tenders are very much influencing the sale as far as we're concerned. Engaging them is about getting creative, as you said. And because so many people are trying to get their attention, for us, sales is both a push and a pull. So we felt that if we created OPP as a brand, most sales agencies are not branded, like Southern Glacier doesn't brand themselves, but we have created OPP as a brand, because then when the bud tenders are following us in social media, coming to our events, engaging with us, it's a lot easier for us to then talk to them about our clients' products, like, Cookies or Purple Hills or Sense and Purpose. Like, all those are incredible brands with products, but there's a lot you need to say about them. And so if the bud tender's coming to you, not just you harassing them, it's a lot easier.
So that brand recognition is so much easier for you as a branded entity. That's so interesting. I never even thought about it like that. So you're right. Sales agencies don't usually brand themselves.
But we're
OPP
like, hey, so if we achieve what we're trying to achieve, which I believe we have, it's that bud tenders and buyers understand that anything in the OPP catalog is something that our team has tried, we stand behind, and because they know us, then that, gives that assurance that they can trust it.
Talk about the OPP team. So we know that's you and Amy,
Yes.
but there's more to it. And we talked about someone who, the brainchild behind that other people's parents.
I feel like, was it Alicia? Was it Miranda? They're going to kill me. But so we were all women to begin. Sorry, Colin. Then Colin joined on a bit like a while ago, actually. And we've just hired Dorian as a rep. So we've got 2 guys, but we're really just, and it wasn't even the intention, I think, because within my career, I've been blessed to be able to work at a very senior level. And so we have a lot of young women that have followed my career in the industry. And so when we put out calls for hiring, we just get amazing pools of women. The team is amazing. I mean, Kiki,
tremendous.
We need to say no more.
I mean, like, what a human.
Yes. I mean, Amber as well, both Amandas. Like, I mean, I could go Shabika, I could go on and on. Like, they're just an incredible group.
And so because you're building this team, and we said it at the onset, you are a rock star, you are an OG, but the fact is that you and Amy are curating this amazing company that's branded but supported by other rock stars who are highly respected. So when you are out there and you're curating your products, it's that rubber stamp of approval.
Yes.
Holy shit, OPP's got it,
Yeah.
you know, in their catalog. Why don't we?
Exactly. And, you know, we've been a year and a half in this business. We've had our portfolios look different over the year and a half, but where we are today is exactly where we want to be with someone like Cookies, a global leader. I mean, I don't know what you think. I don't think there's anyone bigger than Cookies.
Agreed.
The weed is amazing. I showed it to you the other night. So that's where we want to be, because you set out to say, okay, we need everybody to trust us. And then you go looking for clients and you're like, damn, there's not a ton of great weed out there. And I have to say it's getting better. And we actually visited a facility on Friday, and it just restored faith to me that you can grow good weed in a legal system. It's just, for some reason, seems to be very hard. But yeah, building teams, those are like my two skills, I think, really are looking for the white spaces and getting creative about that and bringing people smarter than me around to build an amazing business.
I think that we have a parallel there, because you are, you know, you don't give yourself enough credit as you talk about business, and I've shared things with you and you've shared things with me. I mean, you are very articulate when it comes to business. Might be that you've learned, you know, as you know, through every meeting, but quite frankly, the smartest people are the dumbest people in the room.
Of course, you have to listen.
Yeah. I mean, how much can we, you know, learn by surrounding ourselves with incredibly talented people? So I want to take it back a second, because I said at the onset that you are someone that really paved the way for me personally. The reason you did that, and one of the things, and I don't think. It was in and around one of our whitewater rafting trips, okay? and we would take our families whitewater rafting.
Yes, and like always, it would be first like Labor Day, and it was so freaking cold.
So cold, hated like going in the water. I love my children, I love everyone,
but we're so glad not to whitewater raft.
Yeah, no, we don't need it. So one thing that happened was, during one of those years, we had a conversation about you leaving Rethink and joining and entering the cannabis space. And I thought to myself, and I clearly remember, what the fuck is she doing?
I know.
How is that possible? Like, how does that work? And as we've been smoking joints since we were in high school together, you know, it was very difficult for me, quite honestly, sort of absorbing it and recognizing that, holy shit, like that is a real opportunity for me. And it was the first time in my life that someone actually sort of got into my brain and started that sort of eating away, to the point where, you know, here we are today.
Here we are. And that's amazing. And I'm super proud. Like, it's funny, I've spent 8 years building my network. And now when I'm in meetings, people are like, oh, you know, Jordan Wagman. I'm like, has done an amazing job in a shorter period of time doing that. But it's interesting, because when I joined the industry back when you're talking about like 14, I actually had the thought when I was leaving Rethink, like, oh my God, if this doesn't work out, what would I put on my resume? Like, that's how it felt. And people have often said, you know, I was the first female CEO of a public cannabis company. How did that happen? And people would say, like, how is it you? Or how did it happen? And again, it comes back to, I think, the privilege that I have to take risks, which often women just are not in that position. And so cannabis in the early days was such a risk. And, you know, as women, again, like, oftentimes primary caregivers of children, all things that you had to worry about, you know, going into cannabis. Like, what if you know, were going through a divorce? Like, that would be problematic on, you know, any level. And also the financial risk. So because I was able to take that risk at that time, I was rewarded, because, you know, suddenly I've been in the industry for 3 years back then, and nobody else had. So of course, now I'm the most senior. So it really, that risk absolutely paid off, but it was a risk because none of us knew what this was going to look like back then. Like you said, what does it mean? It was medical. Like, what was I doing in a medical space? But, now I say to everybody, like, just take that first step and you'll figure out where else to go.
Are there people that you brought on early on to surround yourself with that you're very proud of to see where they've sort of risen to today?
As you were talking, I'm like, oh my God, how honest am I going to be here? Yeah, you know what? The interesting thing is, like, lots of people have done amazing that I've worked with, and too like many to name. But the interesting thing in this industry too is you're on top, you're on bottom, you're on top, you're on bottom, and sometimes it's just people don't stay the course with you.
Right.
And that's what's been probably the hardest part, because I'm really open. I really bring in, as I said, people smarter than me and let them shine. And I create, like, I'm proud of the fact that all of my work cultures have been like family. And when those family aren't acting like family, you go, oh my God. So, Amy, obviously, by far, she was one of the first people I hired at 48 North. As soon as I was gone from 48 North, it just felt to me like, if there's anyone I want to partner with, it would be Amy. And she's just incredible. I mean, at 48 North, we were in the top 5 SKUs in every province we were in. She was the only sales rep, one across the whole country. She's just, she's amazing. And she's been at this like forever. I mean, she ran one of the first dispensaries in Toronto, obviously legacy market style, but this is somebody who understands weed, and having people like that are so critical, because especially at 48 North, I was living on a plane, you're a public company, you're doing all these investor meetings. I could do that comfortably knowing Amy was there to make sure nothing she wouldn't smoke would go out the door, because at the end of the day, it does come down to good products, right?
So interesting, as you're talking, the last show that we dropped was Jamie Pearson from Bang.
Right.
And so, when we were in Barcelona, she talked about roots versus suits. And when you sit and talk about Amy, who, is from Legacy and now running this successful company with you, it's amazing how much can we possibly teach someone like Amy,
right,
who's run businesses, who's come from
oh my
legal,
God, there's so much to teach anybody who, I think, Amy is, don't kill me, Amy. I'm not even gonna say her age. She's young and she's amazing. And not like, I'm not saying she's not too young. She's perfect. But what you don't realize, George, you'll totally understand, is the hardest part of any business is the people. Like, people are people and they've got issues and challenges, and you're, operating at a senior level and you just want everything to move forward, and it just doesn't happen like that. So those, I think, are more the life lessons that I'm able to help her with. How do you manage people? How do you inspire people, which she does? How do you, set boundaries? Like, those are the hardest parts, especially when Amy, like myself, is very much, creating a culture of family around. It's hard to do both.
What's the ultimate goal for OPP?
Well, we are looking to launch very soon in the US. We just think there is huge opportunity there. It's really interesting. If you look at the California market, obviously everyone would say, oh, so much more mature than ours. They've got incredible brands. We can't do that. But when you look at their sales and distribution, Canada is much more buttoned down. And, OPP, the most money we spend is on collecting data, so that we can give our clients full reporting, competitive reporting. Like this, you need that stuff. And I talk to my friends in California, they're just not getting that same red carpet, treatment. So we think that there's huge opportunity down there to come in and help these brands sell and grow.
I have written down here, you mentioned regulatory. So my question was, sort of around how do we creatively circumvent?
Yes, that's my favorite
of
skill.
course. And so, but I'm wondering now that you brought up the US. So it's sort of, how do we, and the follow-up question is, I guess, can you be more creative stateside than we can here?
Well, it's interesting because I go back and forth in my head. You know, the thing about Canada, that the best thing about Canada is we always get paid. The government pays 100% of the time.
Right.
So as much as the Americans will make fun of the size of our market or whatever it is, it's like, all right, well, we get paid every time. So, you know, if you look at how much money the retailers own distributors and brands in,
Right.
you know, the States or in California, it's crazy. So, you know, Canada is a highly regulated country. Cannabis is highly regulated, but where that becomes an opportunity is if you can get creative, you don't have unlimited competition.
Right.
You just don't. And so, yes, there's the ability to do beautiful packaging in California. They, of course, have, you know, strict also advertising regulations, but it's a free market. That's the thing about the US. And so everybody's got interesting packaging and all these things going on. And it's I go back and forth. As I said, is it nice in Canada that the regs make it really hard and you have to be super creative to get around it? Or do you look to somewhere like California that has the exact same size population as ours, shoved in a much smaller space?
What's the most creative that you've had to have been to market a product, whether it be the OPP brand or a product?
Okay, well, OPP is different because we're not licensed, so we're not regulated.
Correct.
That said, we abide by all the regulations for the, you know, marketing and sales agencies. So each province has different ones. But, you know, with 48 North, I'm like, oh God, I can't tell you the craziest ones because those have to stay in the vault. But, you know, for example, you were allowed to market your business, right, in Canada. And we were a public company, so you were allowed to promote the stock. So we had billboards up along the Gardner, you know, quote unquote, promoting the stock. That was pretty crazy. We had a truck drive across the country, like a food truck that we had sort of decked out to hand out our t-shirts, 48 North. And again, we were promoting the stock in front of Trinity Bellwoods, handing out t-shirts. So it's, you know, it's those little things. And then just getting as creative as you could.
Did you ever get your hand slapped for something like
Health
that?
Canada definitely called after the truck and said, no, no more. And we said, cool, that campaign was over.
Right.
Anyway.
Right. Ask for forgiveness, right? Don't ask for
permission. I mean, we were promoting the stock.
Right. Right. Fair enough.
With t-shirts that say, you know, the future is female flower and power to the people. And
you said earlier, you mentioned, you know, that using for recreational, oftentimes, I don't want to misquote you, but oftentimes there's, you know, there's a health and wellness component.
We see it as medical 100%. Like medical is a weird word, right? Because it's been
solving for a need state.
Yeah. But it is, we see that. And that's fine that you can get it at a dispensary. Like, I think a lot of people don't realize that it's the exact same weed. Like there's no such thing as medical cannabis.
Right.
There's only the way that you get it and the way that the government defines it.
And there's a little bit of a write-off, you know.
100%. But I'm talking about the actual weed.
Yeah. No, 100%.
No, medical is quite an interesting endeavor for sure. But it's not different cannabis. Like often when companies were both medical and recreational, they grow the same batch. Half of it goes medical, half of it goes, you know, like that.
But do you believe that a lot of people, I won't say all, but I will say a lot of us who consume cannabis, party as we do, that we are doing so to solve for a need state, that it's not necessarily for the quote unquote getting high, but I'll give you my example. My example is I didn't realize until 7 years ago that I actually was consuming cannabis to help with my psoriasis. Right. Do you believe there's something to that? For
100%.
You do.
I mean, obviously, if you like the way you feel, you continue that when you're using cannabis. And so likely it's about, you know, taking the edge off anxiety or whatever it is. If you find that helps you function better, then to me, that's, you know, as you said, solving for a need state. I think the prohibition mentality that people feel about, you know, the productivity, or they think, it's amazing to me, like people still think, knowing that people like me and you are daily consumers, that weed will still make you lazy. And it's crazy because it's just not anything I see. I mean, if I'm not going to say that this doesn't happen to some people, and you know, they have to figure their shit out for
Right.
sure. But this is
Right.
not a gateway drug. This is not something that, people who are successful
Right.
you can do. But I also think that people who aren't daily consumers of cannabis don't understand that you're not getting high all day. I mean, for me, I don't use cannabis most days because I am one of those people that can find myself being like, oh, I just want to sit and think, and it's harder to be productive.
Right.
But it's obviously not the case for everyone. And if you are a full day consumer, like nobody's high all day. Your tolerance is just way too strong for that, but you are getting the effects of the cannabinoids.
100%. And so for me, like I got up early this morning with Tamar and we were in the gym and I was spun for a while and stood on my head and here we are. And it's what, like, 10:30 in the morning, right? So I want to ask, well, first you mentioned gateway. It's funny. I think I said the word gateway a couple weeks ago, and I think it's a gateway to feeling better. Like
of course.
Like,
but it's not a gateway to heroin.
No, I am with. I know what you're saying.
It's just hilarious. I don't even know where people came up with that. Like as a pothead, all my friends, we stick together. I don't know anybody that moved on to super hard drugs in any aggressive way.
No, and not because of pot.
Not because of pot.
Certainly not.
So it's just insane. The prohibition mentality is just, it doesn't go away for all of us. Like I feel it inside myself, like hiding it from your kids, but not having an issue drinking a glass of wine in front of them. I don't do that anymore, but so many do.
You made it okay for me to talk to Jonah and Jamie about cannabis. It really, it was you.
I shame people.
It wasn't the shaming, honestly. Like it wasn't, for me, it was, you were totally comfortable about talking about it in front of your kids without hesitation, without shame, but because it was a business that you were going into and you were going into full steam ahead and you believed in.
Yeah. So they've known since they were really young about that. This is what I do for a living. This is what I do recreationally or for whatever purposes. Neither of my kids are that into it as far as I know, but I think it's that like my mom does it. It's not cool because there's weed all over my house all the time. Right. Nobody takes it anywhere. But yes, that idea that, from the minute your kid's born, you would have no issue drinking a glass of wine or a beer in front of them, but you're like hiding in the corners. And I know a lot of this has to do with smoking. And I try and, in my head, put these things together. I get that I do smoke joints. That's my preferred method of imbibing. But I get where you just don't ever want to see your kids with their pure lungs that, that they're smoking. And I think that's the challenge, even on the lounges that will hopefully open up and all of this stuff. It's the smoking piece, I think, that does keep cannabis a little bit, well, A, from a regulatory perspective, and B, like, I would love a day where we go to concerts and where you're lining up for beer, you could obviously get your weed, but it's the smoking that I think is making this challenging.
Which is why, thankfully, I get to be employed because it's all about food and beverage, right? So for me, it's like, okay, well, you might not be able to smoke here, but you could certainly buy a quality beverage, or
100%.
Right? So let's make it at least apples to apples. There's no comparison right now where cannabis can't be consumed in and around alcohol.
Yeah, 100%. And you know what? It's interesting. The drinks are really interesting. A lot of people are super bullish on them because we do drink most of our psychoactives, the daily stuff, coffee, tea, alcohol, energy drinks, like that's how we're used to it. Right. So for example, one of my clients, Karen, she was at Nestle Waters for like 25 years and she created this drink that's for sale in Alberta and Ontario, Sense and Purpose. And the drinks are really evolving. Like hers are cold pressed juices, no sugar, smaller milligrams of THC. So like you can have more than one, right? As you're sitting there. Like that's the thing. People are like, why can't we have 1 million milligrams in the drinks? Yep. And I get it. And I wish the regs were different for all of it edibles. But at the same time, if you're sitting over the course of a night, the way someone might be drinking a beer, like it's nice to have these options that you can sit and sip on these drinks. But I love that Karen has come in and elevated it because there was something really weird with cannabis back in 2014 when we first bought the dispensary in LA. all this stuff in the dispensary was made by the budtender. So you'd have like a homemade lemon square wrapped in cellophane.
Right.
And I was like, okay, this is amazing. Because you remember I had my David's Tea vision.
Right.
Oh my God, no one's branding this.
Right.
But over the course of a couple months, I was going down to LA every 4 weeks to, like work at the dispensary, make sure everything was running okay. Little by little, Kiva's came in and I was like, oh no. And then Venice Beach Cookie Company, like with branded products. And I was like, okay, this is all happening. The interesting thing was all these products, especially the drinks, everybody was mimicking junk food. This is where I think what you've done is so incredible. And you've really opened my eyes to this as well. It was like syrupy drinks and, gummies, chocolates. Like if you think about it, it's just kind of weird. So I think what we're seeing now with people like yourselves and all the chefs in your network that are coming in, it's like, hold on a minute, this is an ingredient. And that's what, Karen's done with Sense and Purpose as well. It's like, we can have a quality drink. You can enjoy that drink.
That's right.
And part of it, to be fair, is the evolution of the extraction processes and the, nano emulsifying and all the things. Because I think you were masking a lot. Sugar can help mask a lot.
There's no question.
Right?
Absolutely. I think that, it's nice to see that changes are being made. I think that regs have to change in order for the mentality to change in terms of the quality of product in Canada. I think in the US, it's a bigger market. People are more apt to want to sort of make the change when they think that a larger market will purchase the products.
Right. It is hard. It's hard to have a niche. Yeah,
right?
It's very hard. And, you have to make the sale 3 times. Like you have to sell in Canada to the government of whatever province you're in.
Right.
And then the retailer needs to think about putting you on the shelf, which is our job to make sure the retailers are pulling our clients out of the government distributor.
Right.
But you need that sale. And then the consumer needs to buy it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hard in any industry, never mind cannabis, where you have a robust legacy market that people can order and get it delivered right to their door. They're not paying tax on that. But someone said last week, I'd love to verify this, that we're upwards of 56% of cannabis users in Canada are using legal. I'm stumbling on my words because it's not what I see, but the fact is we have almost 2,000 dispensaries in Ontario. That is insane. I think there's 1,200 LCBOs or something like that. I could be wrong, but it's just too much. And so the struggle of that, meaning that not many retailers have the cash flow to be ordering and trying new things. And, they're competing with 7 on a block. Like it trickles its way out to those people who are trying to build product brands. I mean, on top of that, you sell to the government and the government doesn't tell you who's carrying your product. Like imagine you made an umbrella and you were selling it across and you had no clue what stores carried your umbrella so you could service them properly. Right. So it's really, really hard. And that's why we do spend so much on data, because you want to service those retailers that are carrying your products. But the fact is, it's a really hard business and it's hard to be niche.
The beverages, and I've mentioned it a couple times, I just see it being the opportunity, food and beverage, but beverages specifically, because we're not, we smoke joints, but we aren't going to hand, and I've used this phrasing so many times, but we're not going to hand someone new to cannabis rolling papers and flour and say, go roll a joint. We're going to say, here's a healthy drink or tea or something. This will solve for your need state. Consume it the way you normally would anything else that you do throughout your day. Right? It makes sense to people. That's how we're going to draw those people into cannabis. So that's why I feel like food and beverage are real opportunities, but healthier versions. Right?
I agree that we're going to see, God willing, the lounges open and like all these opportunities to elevate and do more with the drinks and with food. But as it stands today at the retail level, it's just really hard. It's really hard. Beverages are selling and growing. The category keeps growing.
Sell into that category?
Well, that's Sense and Purpose.
That is Sense and Purpose.
Yeah. So that's the cold pressed juices like yuzu.
Where would I find them?
Oh my God!
Is that US?
No, here in Canada.
No way.
Yeah, in Alberta and
Sense
Ontario.
And Purpose.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know of them.
Yeah, check it out.
Well,
And
Karen's
Karen's
getting a
amazing.
lot of
I
publicity
know. I'm
today.
like, let's talk about Purple Hills and Peter Miller,
Well,
who's
so I will say
incredible.
Purple Hills, forget it, it wasn't because of you necessarily, but it's because of we're doing the Kind Summer Fair.
Yeah,
And we had spoken with Peter
yeah.
previously, and
Peter's
it
a
was one of the
true
places,
rock star.
like really just what a mensch,
Yeah.
and so knowledgeable, and his facility, like his
Yeah,
place looks
yeah,
spectacular.
amazing.
And I definitely want to do something.
You have to come.
So a couple more things before we sort of wrap this up, but do you have, just going back to parenting, and again, I know that you and I, we
Right.
don't claim to be anything other than ourselves. We are not perfect parents,
Right.
perfect people, but you did pave the way for me. So what would you do? What would you suggest?
Yeah.
What would you advise other parents that might be struggling with that conversation?
Yeah.
How do you sort of bridge the gap for the kids and make them understand that that this isn't just Spicoli in
Right.
Fast Times?
Right. Well, I mean, do you have not you, but does one have a conversation with their kids about alcohol? Yes, but have they been drinking it in front of them if they drink alcohol forever? Yes.
Right.
So I think it's like normalizing anything is great because kids, people, it's our nature like to go after things that seem a bit edgy and out of our reach, or not everyone's nature, but a lot. So to me, it would be normalizing it. Again, putting the smoking piece aside, that it's just around, just like alcohol would be. Then obviously you get to the age, as you would with alcohol, that you're like, you're making it clear this is the age that the government says you can drink. In Canada, it's 19. Right. So you're saying, I don't think that's a good idea. You do before whatever it is. Right. Like it's the same. And so talking to your kids about the age limits is really about brain development and other things like that. But I mean, what are you going to do? People, like kids, they're exposed to this, whether you are exposing them or not. So why not allow them to be able to come to you because they don't think they're going to get in trouble? Like I've had my kids try it, get too high, call me, and then we pick up and we do those things. But I now, looking back, wish that I had explained dosing and any of these things.
And that's why I come back to it's so counterintuitive with the limitations on the educational components that we can create.
Yeah.
Right. So because it's so limiting, we don't have the ability to go out and educate our kids. Like, the cracking of the egg, and, on the commercial,
your brain on drugs.
Your brain on drugs, right? Like, and the glass for drinking alcohol, right? You have that one beer, and then it sort of throws another second and third and a fourth. But we don't have the ability to educate our youth the way, and creatively, the way that they would be drawn to. And I think it's very counterintuitive from Health Canada's perspective.
Yeah, you know what? It's there's a lot there, right? Even forget about kids, like the current packaging regs, which I pray will change. I have been at this as long as you could be, and I can't read these packages. Right? Like some people are putting like the milligrams.
I can't open the fucking packages.
That I understand. That won't change. That's, child-proof.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Jordan-proof. Yeah.
I don't know. It's definitely, that's definitely a challenge. But yeah, it's hard to read these labels. And so it's not surprising to me that anyone of any age might smoke too much or do too much, because it's just not intuitive.
So what else, not what else, but what would you like to see if there was something at the top of your list? What would you like to see changed? And whether Canadian, American, just what would you like to see changed that could help perpetuate our narrative?
I mean, what I number one want to be changed, I think would change everything, is just the taxation. And both Canada and, the US, but especially if we're talking about Canada, I mean, it's very difficult to make money and have margin because of the amount of tax we pay. And you were talking more about, how do we educate, but it's not like I'm like, we need more money. It's not that. It's that to be able to spend the money to make great products and educate people and do it right. Like you need to have a margin.
Right.
And it's really, really, really difficult. Now, I appreciate all the government distributors, the OCS, et cetera. They have a massively hard job. They're doing an amazing job with the best that they can. But, at the same time, to pay the percentages that we do on distribution to the government, who are repping every single brand that's available, that then still requires the brands to hire an agency like OPP to ensure that the retailers are ordering their products from the government. So I'm looking and saying maybe the government could reduce the distribution percentage. Like, that's not a tax. That's or I don't know, Jordan. I think that's the biggest problem. And look, the government would say, they've said it to me, and they would say, like, we didn't tell anybody this was going to be a lucrative industry. But it's not just about making money. It's about having the money to do things right. And being able to contribute to the communities and educate and do all of that. And everybody is really struggling with that. They're struggling.
Last question. Do you have a preference between indoor and outdoor pot? Do you?
I do not necessarily. I'm pretty easygoing about weed, having grown up when I did. Like, we didn't ask what cultivar is this, or
Right,
you just
exactly.
gave your money and got it. But
Exactly.
again, I know a lot of people of my generation still went deep, usually like 20-year-old men for some reason. But that just wasn't the world that I lived in. But now that I'm more educated, there's nothing like looking at the shelf appeal of indoor flower is just so pretty. But at the end of the day, I'm just like looking to get high.
Yeah. I mean, flower, for me, not that flower is flower, but quality flower is quality flower.
For sure.
Right? Whether indoor or outdoor.
Yeah.
Okay, so other people's pot. If someone is out there listening, they want to work with you, there's a brand in the US that's saying, holy shit, they're coming to the US. How do they get in touch with you?
I would just go to our Instagram and other people's pot and DM us, and we answer, and
amazing.
Away we go.
Okay. And what's up for the summer? You got some plans?
Yeah. Jordan and I are going away together on Thursday. So it's a bit crazy times.
Crazy.
But then you'll also be in Berlin for
ICBC.
The ICBC. Yeah. So all of our European counterparts, super excited to be there, because that's a huge opportunity. We can talk about another time.
Huge.
Maybe
Alex
post
Rogers.
Berlin, we'll do a post Berlin roundup.
Or maybe even in Berlin, we'll do
something.
Oh my
God, yes.
Alex Rogers was on here from ICBC. Yes. And I'm a huge fan of that show. I'm so excited. And now that you guys are going out, okay, we're gonna leave it here, and I know Mike, the producer, has another show, so he's definitely looking at the watch right now. But I would be remiss if I didn't end a show, or if I ended a show without mentioning the word or name Rob.
I knew you were gonna say that.
And so
my life partner.
You have an amazing significant other that has become a good friend of mine.
Yes.
And someone that I truly have learned so much from.
But he likes to fly under the radar, so we
really
won't even
does.
say his name. But no, yes, Rob, I've been working with in this industry since early 2014. He has taught me so much about everything, like capital markets, all of this. But he's
brilliant mind.
Yeah, and he's amazing. And right now he's working with an amazing company called Fos. They have these unbelievable lights. This is the part that I get super excited about when I think about building my facilities back in 14, 15. We didn't have LED, or there was, but not really. But the way that these lights, like these Fos lights, have advanced, I'm so hopeful for the legal industry now. That facility I was at on Friday, we're using these lights, and the flower was beautiful. So I think, Rob's working on other things, but we all interconnect because we all want to. He brings money to the industry. We take that. We want to grow amazing flower. We want to educate and engage everybody, and just have the best cannabis experience everyone can have.
Well, that was awesome. Did you have fun?
Thank you, Jordan. I did. And I just want to say you inspire me too, because when did you start again in the industry?
I mean, legally 5 years ago.
Right. But look at what you have done with this podcast, with the cooking class, not the classes, but the dinner parties.
Thank you.
Amazing. It's not easy to cook with cannabis, by the way, people, although Jordan might tell you it is. And if you
Well, I'll
follow
teach
his
how.
way, you could teach how. But it's a big math, like it's a
No
science
question.
to
Yeah,
it,
there's no
right?
question.
Leave it to the professionals.
And there's some creativity certainly behind it. Yes, it's a lot of fun. But listen, I love you.
I love you.
And I can't wait for our trip. And thank you for doing this.
Thank
It was
you.
amazing and finding the time. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
To all of our listeners out there, this has been a very special show. I will just keep it simple and say, if you are out there, if you're struggling with mental health, I am always available.
Yes.
If we can be responsible for one thing in this world, it is to be good people.
Yeah.
Let's be good humans and have a great day, everybody. Thanks for listening.